Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. Dante's hand slams against the wall beside Adrian's head, trapping him. Their faces are inches apart, breath mingling in the darkness of Adrian's childhood bedroom. "I've wanted you since we were 17, Dante growls. "Every single day for 8 years. And tonight, I'm done pretending." Before we begin, if you want to hear uncensored stories, the ones too hot for YouTube, check out my Patreon in the description. Now let's get into it. The notification pinged on Adrian's phone just as he was pulling into his parents' driveway. One message, from a number he'd never saved but would recognize anywhere. Dante Crawford. "In town for the weekend. Beer at Murphy's tonight?" Adrian sat in his parked car, staring at those 9 words like they held the secrets of the universe. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles going white. 3 years. 3 years since he'd seen Dante in person, since their college graduation when they'd hugged goodbye and promised to stay in touch, then proceeded to let the distance do what distance does best. Turn best friends into occasional texts, birthday messages, likes on social media posts. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He could say he was busy, make an excuse, protect himself from the inevitable rush of feelings that seeing Dante always triggered. Feelings he'd been harboring since they were 17 years old, sitting in Dante's basement playing video games while Adrian tried desperately not to stare at the way his best friend's shirt rode up when he stretched. "Yeah, what time?" The reply came instantly, like Dante had been waiting, watching his phone for Adrian's response. 8. "Can't wait to see you, man." Adrian's heart did something complicated in his chest. He was 25 years old, had a decent job in graphic design, his own apartment 2 states away, a life that didn't include pining after his straight best friend from high school. He'd moved on. Dated other people, had experiences, built a whole existence that didn't revolve around Dante Crawford and his stupid, perfect smile. Except none of that was entirely true, and Adrian knew it. He grabbed his weekend bag from the trunk and headed inside. His mom greeted him with the kind of enthusiasm only mothers possess, pulling him into a hug that smelled like vanilla and the lavender detergent she'd used his whole life. "My baby's home." She held him at arm's length, examining his face. "You look thin. Are you eating?" "Mom, I'm fine." "Well, I made your favorite, pot roast, and I heard Dante's in town too. His mother mentioned it at book club last week." Of course she had. The Crawfords lived 3 houses down, had been neighbors since Adrian was 6 years old. Their mothers were best friends, which meant Adrian and Dante had been thrown together from childhood, expected to be friends simply by proximity. That it had worked, that they'd actually become inseparable, was both a blessing and a curse Adrian had been living with for nearly 2 decades. "He's texted me," Adrian admitted. "We're getting beer tonight." His mother's face lit up with the kind of knowing smile that made Adrian want to crawl under the nearest rock. "That boy always did have a soft spot for you." "We're friends, Mom. Just friends." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. He spent the afternoon unpacking, catching up with his parents, trying not to watch the clock creep toward 8, failing spectacularly at that last part. By 7:30, he'd changed his shirt 3 times, abandoned his hair as a lost cause, and was pacing his childhood bedroom like a caged animal. The room hadn't changed much since high school. Same blue walls, same desk where he'd done homework while texting Dante. Same bed where he'd lain awake countless nights, wrestling with feelings he couldn't name, couldn't admit, couldn't make disappear no matter how hard he tried. His phone buzzed. Dante again. "Walking over now. Meet me outside?" Adrian's stomach performed acrobatics worthy of an Olympic gymnast. He grabbed his jacket, called goodbye to his parents, and stepped out into the crisp autumn evening. The street looked the same as it had when they were teenagers. Same houses, same trees now shedding their leaves in brilliant reds and golds. Same sidewalk where they'd learned to ride bikes and played basketball and talked about everything and nothing. Then Dante rounded the corner, and Adrian forgot how to breathe. 3 years had been kind to Dante Crawford. He'd always been good-looking, that wasn't new. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of honey in sunlight. But time had refined him, sharpened the angles of his jaw, added definition to his frame that his college athlete build had only hinted at. He wore a simple black Henley and jeans, hands shoved in his pockets, and when he spotted Adrian, his face split into a grin that could have powered the entire neighborhood. Adrian. The way Dante said his name, warm and familiar, and edged with something Adrian couldn't quite identify, made his chest ache. "Hey," Adrian's voice came out rougher than intended. He cleared his throat. "You look good." Dante's eyes traveled over him, slow and assessing in a way that made Adrian's skin prickle with awareness. "So do you. Really good." There was weight in those words, something that felt different than the casual compliments they'd exchanged as teenagers. Adrian told himself he was imagining it, that desperation was making him read meaning into innocent observation. They walked toward Murphy's, a dive bar that had been serving the town since before they were born. The silence between them should have been comfortable. They'd been friends long enough that silence was easy. But this felt charged, somehow, electric with tension Adrian didn't understand. "So," Dante said as they walked, "how's the city? The job? Dating anyone?" The questions were normal, expected, but something in Dante's voice when he asked about dating made Adrian's pulse spike. "City's fine, job's good, and no, not dating anyone right now." Adrian glanced at Dante sideways. "You?" Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "No, nobody serious." They reached Murphy's and pushed inside. The bar was exactly as Adrian remembered, dim lighting and scarred wood tables, the smell of beer and fried food, classic rock playing from ancient speakers. A few locals occupied their usual spots, and the bartender nodded at them in recognition. They claimed a booth in the back, ordered beers, and for a while fell into the easy rhythm of old friends catching up. Dante talked about his job in sports medicine, working with a college team in the next state over. Adrian shared stories about his design projects, the clients who wanted impossible things, the satisfaction of creating something from nothing. But underneath the normal conversation, something else simmered. Adrian kept catching Dante watching him with an intensity that felt new, different, and every accidental brush of their hands when they reached for their beers sent electricity racing up Adrian's arm. 3 beers in, Dante leaned back against the booth, his eyes never leaving Adrian's face. "I've missed this. Missed you." Adrian's throat went tight. "I've missed you too." "No, I don't think you understand." Dante leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I've really missed you, Adrian. Every day." The way he said it, the heat in his eyes, made Adrian's heart hammer against his ribs. This felt dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff and looking down. "Dante, Tell me something," Dante interrupted. "Why'd we stop talking?" "Really?" Adrian stared into his beer, unable to meet those honey-colored eyes. "We got busy. Life happened. That's what happens after college." "Bullshit." The word hung between them, sharp and challenging. Adrian's head snapped up. "What? That's bullshit and we both know it." Dante's voice was low, intense. "We were best friends for over a decade. We talked every single day. Then graduation happens and suddenly you can barely respond to my texts? You avoid my calls? What the hell, Adrian?" Guilt twisted in Adrian's gut. He'd known Dante had noticed, had wondered about the distance Adrian had deliberately created. But hearing the hurt in his voice made it real in a way Adrian had been avoiding. "I needed space," Adrian said quietly. "Needed to figure some things out." "Things?" Dante's eyes searched his face. "What things?" Adrian couldn't answer that. Couldn't say that being around Dante had become torture, that every moment together was a reminder of what Adrian wanted and could never have. That distance had been survival, not choice. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. "Fine," Dante said finally, something flickering across his face that looked like pain. "Don't tell me. But I'm done pretending this is normal. Done pretending I don't notice that something changed between us." "Nothing changed," Adrian lied, his voice barely above a whisper. Dante laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everything changed. You changed. One day you were my best friend, the person I told everything to, and the next you were gone. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" Adrian's hands clenched around his beer bottle. "I'm sorry. I don't want your apology, I want the truth." Dante leaned closer, his voice dropping even lower. "What are you so afraid of, Adrian?" "Everything." The words screamed through Adrian's mind, but he couldn't voice it. Couldn't admit that he was afraid of wanting too much, of ruining the friendship they'd had, of Dante seeing the truth written all over his face. "I should go." Adrian started to slide out of the booth, but Dante's hand shot out, catching his wrist. The contact sent fire through Adrian's nervous system. Dante's hand was warm, strong, his grip firm but not painful. Just enough to keep Adrian in place, to make him look up and meet those intense eyes. "Don't run," Dante said softly. "Not again. Please." The please broke something in Adrian's chest. He sank back into the booth, Dante's hand still circling his wrist, thumb resting against his racing pulse. "Talk to me," Dante urged. "Like you used to. Tell me what's going on in that head of yours." Adrian closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." The temptation to confess everything was overwhelming. To lay it all out, every secret he'd been carrying, every feeling he'd tried to bury. But fear held him back, kept the words locked behind his teeth. Dante's thumb moved slightly, stroking over Adrian's pulse point in a gesture that felt too intimate for friendship, too deliberate to be accidental. The touch sent shivers down Adrian's spine. When Adrian opened his eyes, Dante was watching him with an expression he'd never seen before, something raw and hungry and almost desperate. "Come back to my place," Dante said, his voice rough. "We need to talk, really talk, and I can't do this here." Every instinct screamed at Adrian to say no, to protect himself, to maintain the distance he'd worked so hard to create. But Dante's hand on his wrist felt like an anchor, and he was so tired of running. "Okay," Adrian whispered. They paid their tab and walked out into the night. The October air had turned cold, their breath misting in front of them. Dante's hand never left Adrian's wrist as they walked, his grip gentle but constant, like he was afraid Adrian might disappear if he let go. The Crawford house was dark when they arrived. Dante's parents were traveling, he explained, visiting family in Colorado. They had the place to themselves. Something about that information made Adrian's pulse spike higher. They were alone. Completely alone in the house where they'd spent countless hours as kids and teenagers, playing games and watching movies and studying for tests. Dante led him inside, finally releasing his wrist. The house smelled the same, that familiar scent of the Crawford family home. Dante gestured toward the basement stairs. "Come on." The basement was their spot, always had been. Mr. Crawford had finished it when Dante was 12, turning it into a space with a big sectional couch, a TV, a gaming setup. This was where they'd logged hundreds of hours playing video games, where they'd watched every Marvel movie together, where they'd talked about their dreams and fears and everything in between. Dante flipped on the lamps, casting the space in warm, low light. He moved to the small fridge in the corner, pulled out 2 beers, and handed one to Adrian before dropping onto the couch. Adrian sat on the opposite end, maintaining distance, trying to calm the chaos in his chest. For a long moment, they just sat there in silence. Then Dante spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to not run. Can you promise me that?" Adrian's mouth went dry. "I can't promise anything until I know what you're going to say." "Fair enough." Dante took a long pull from his beer, then set it aside. He turned to face Adrian fully, his expression more serious than Adrian had ever seen it. "You asked what changed. The truth is, nothing changed for me. I've felt the same way about you since we were 17 years old." Adrian's heart stopped. "What?" "I'm in love with you, Adrian. Have been for 8 years. Dante's voice was steady despite the bomb he'd just dropped. "That's why the distance killed me. That's why I've missed you every single day. That's why I can't do this casual friendship thing anymore." The words crashed over Adrian like a tidal wave. His mind struggled to process what he was hearing, to reconcile Dante's confession with everything he'd believed for nearly a decade. "You're..." Adrian's voice broke. "You can't be. You're straight. You dated girls in high school. "I dated girls because that's what I was supposed to do." Dante's laugh was bitter. "Because I was terrified of what it meant that the only person I really wanted was my best friend. A guy. You." Adrian couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. He'd spent 8 years convinced his feelings were one-sided, that Dante was forever out of reach, that the ache in his chest was something he'd have to learn to live with. "Say something," Dante pleaded. "Anything." "I don't." Adrian struggled for words. "When did you? How?" Dante moved closer, closing the distance between them on the couch. "Remember junior year? Spring break when we drove down to the coast with your parents' car?" Adrian nodded mutely. He remembered. 4 days of freedom, just the two of them, cheap motel rooms and beach bonfires, and feeling more alive than he ever had before. "That last night," Dante continued, "we stayed up until sunrise talking on the beach. You fell asleep with your head on my shoulder, and I just sat there watching you sleep, watching the sun come up, and I realized I never wanted to be anywhere else, never wanted to be with anyone else." Adrian's vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. "That was 8 years ago." "I know. You've known for 8 years and you never said anything?" Dante's hand came up, cupping Adrian's face with a gentleness that made his breath catch. "I was terrified. Terrified of losing you, of ruining our friendship, of you looking at me differently. So I pushed it down, tried to ignore it, dated people I didn't care about, convinced myself it would go away." His thumb traced Adrian's cheekbone. "It never went away. It never even faded." "Why now?" Adrian whispered. "Why tell me now?" "Because watching you pull away from me was worse than any rejection could be." Dante's eyes held his, intense and vulnerable. "Because I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Because you're here, and I'm here, and I can't let you leave again without knowing if there's any chance you might feel the same way." Adrian's entire world was tilting on its axis. Everything he'd believed, every assumption he'd made was crumbling. "Dante, Adrian's voice shook. "I've wanted you since we were 17 too." The confession hung in the air between them. 8 years of longing compressed into a single sentence. Dante went very still. "What did you say?" "I've been in love with you for 8 years. Adrian's words came faster now, tumbling out like a dam breaking. "That's why I created distance, because being around you hurt too much. Because every time I saw you, I wanted things I thought I could never have. Because pretending to be just your friend was killing me. Adrian." The way Dante said his name was reverent, awed. "I thought you were straight," Adrian continued, tears finally spilling over. I thought I was alone in this. I thought. Dante's mouth covered his, swallowing the words. The kiss was everything Adrian had imagined in his secret moments, and nothing like he'd expected all at once. Dante's lips were soft but demanding, his hands still cradling Adrian's face, while his other hand slid into Adrian's hair. The contact sent electricity coursing through Adrian's entire body, every nerve ending suddenly alive. Adrian had been kissed before, had dated, had experiences, but nothing had ever felt like this. Like coming home and diving off a cliff simultaneously. Like everything he'd been searching for had been right here all along. When Dante finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against Adrian's, their breath mingling in the small space between them. 8 years, Dante said, his voice rough with emotion. We wasted 8 years. We didn't waste them, Adrian replied, his hands coming up to grip Dante's shirt. We just needed them to get here. Dante kissed him again, deeper this time, and Adrian melted into it. This was what he'd been denying himself, what he'd been running from. The overwhelming rightness of Dante's mouth on his, Dante's hands on his body, Dante wanting him back. When they broke apart again, Dante was smiling. That smile Adrian had loved since they were kids, but transformed now by heat and desire and promise. I need to tell you something else, Dante said, his thumb tracing Adrian's lower lip. I've thought about this so many times, thought about what it would be like to finally touch you, to kiss you, to have you. His eyes darkened. And now that I know you want this too, now that I know I'm not alone, I don't think I can stop. Adrian's breath caught. I don't want you to stop. The words were barely out of his mouth before Dante was kissing him again, harder this time, more demanding. His hand slid down to Adrian's waist, pulling him closer until Adrian was practically in his lap. Adrian went willingly, straddling Dante's thighs, his hands finding their way into Dante's dark hair. The position put them at eye level, and when Dante pulled back to look at him, the hunger in his expression made Adrian tremble. I need you to know, Dante said, his hands firm on Adrian's hips. I've never done this with a guy before. You'll be my first. Adrian's heart stuttered. I've never done this with anyone before. Dante's eyes widened. You're a virgin? Adrian felt heat flood his face. Yeah, I dated people, but I couldn't. Not when all I wanted was you. Something fierce and possessive flashed across Dante's face. So we'll be each other's firsts, if you want, Adrian said softly. If you're ready. Dante's hands tightened on his hips. I've been ready for 8 years. The question is, are you? Adrian answered by kissing him, pouring 8 years of want and need and love into the contact. Dante responded in kind, his hands sliding under Adrian's shirt to touch bare skin, drawing a gasp from Adrian's throat. The sensation of Dante's calloused hands on his skin was overwhelming. Adrian had imagined this countless times, late at night when he couldn't sleep, when memories of Dante crowded too close. But imagination paled compared to reality, compared to the heat of Dante's touch, the way his fingers traced Adrian's ribs like he was learning him, mapping him. Adrian, Dante murmured against his mouth. Tell me what you want. Everything, Adrian breathed. I want everything. Dante groaned, the sound vibrating through Adrian's chest. You have no idea what you do to me. His hand slid higher, pushing Adrian's shirt up, and Adrian lifted his arms to let Dante pull it off completely. The cool air of the basement raised goosebumps on his skin, but Dante's gaze was hot enough to burn. God, you're beautiful, Dante said, his hands spreading across Adrian's chest. I've wanted to see you like this for so long. Adrian felt exposed but not vulnerable. The way Dante looked at him, with such open desire and tenderness, made him feel cherished rather than nervous. Dante leaned forward, his mouth finding Adrian's collarbone, teeth scraping lightly. Adrian's head fell back, a soft sound escaping his throat. Dante's lips traced lower, learning the geography of Adrian's chest and stomach, while his hands remained steady on Adrian's hips. Every touch felt significant, weighted with years of wanting. Adrian's hands fisted in Dante's hair, holding on as sensation washed over him in waves. "Dante," Adrian gasped. "Please." "Please what?" Dante's voice was rough. "Tell me what you need." "You. Just you." Dante pulled back enough to look at Adrian's face, his expression intense. "Come upstairs with me." The word sent Adrian's pulse into overdrive. "Okay." They stood, and Dante caught Adrian's hand, lacing their fingers together. He led Adrian through the basement, up the stairs, through the dark house to his bedroom. The space was different than Adrian remembered from high school, more adult now, but still undeniably Dante's. Dante turned on a lamp, casting the room in soft, golden light. Then he turned to Adrian, his eyes searching. "We can stop any time," Dante said. "If you're not ready, if you change your mind, we stop, okay?" Adrian's chest tightened with affection. "Okay." But he didn't want to stop. He'd spent 8 years running from this, from his feelings, from the possibility of having what he wanted. He was done running. He crossed to Dante and kissed him, slow and deep. Dante's hands came up to cup his face, holding him like he was something precious. When they broke apart, Adrian reached for the hem of Dante's shirt. "Your turn," he said softly. Dante let Adrian pull his shirt off, revealing the body Adrian had tried so hard not to stare at over the years. Broad shoulders, defined chest and stomach, the kind of build that came from dedicated athletic training. He was beautiful. And for the first time, Adrian let himself really look, let himself appreciate without guilt or shame. Dante's hands found Adrian's waist, pulling him close until they were chest to chest, skin against skin. The contact made Adrian's breath hitch. "You feel so good," Dante murmured, his mouth finding Adrian's neck. "So perfect." Adrian's hands explored Dante's back, feeling muscle shift under skin, learning the feel of him. This was real. This was happening. After 8 years of wanting, of denying himself, of believing it was impossible, Dante Crawford was kissing him, touching him, looking at him like he was the only thing in the world that mattered. Dante walked him backward toward the bed, and Adrian went willingly. When the back of his knees hit the mattress, he sat, and Dante immediately knelt between his legs, hands sliding up his thighs. "Adrian," Dante said, his voice dropping lower, "I want to make this good for you. I want to make you feel everything." "You already are," Adrian breathed. Dante's hands moved to Adrian's belt, pausing. "Can I?" Adrian nodded, then remembered Dante's earlier instruction. "Yes. Please, yes." Dante unfastened Adrian's belt with careful hands, then his jeans, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He was taking his time, and Adrian appreciated it, even as need coiled tighter in his stomach. When Dante finally pushed him back onto the bed and covered his body with his own, Adrian's mind went blissfully blank. There was only sensation. Dante's weight, his heat, his mouth moving down Adrian's throat and chest, his hands everywhere. "Tell me if anything doesn't feel right," Dante said against Adrian's skin. "Tell me what you like." Adrian could barely form coherent thoughts, let alone words. Everything Dante did felt right, felt perfect, felt like finally coming home after years of being lost. Dante's mouth traveled lower, and Adrian's hands fisted in the sheets. He'd never felt anything like this, never let anyone this close. But with Dante, He felt safe enough to let go, to surrender to sensation, to trust completely. When Dante finally looked up at him, his eyes dark with desire, Adrian felt like he might combust from the intensity of it. "You're so responsive," Dante said, his voice full of wonder. "Every touch, every kiss, you light up." "Only for you," Adrian managed. "Always only for you." Dante's expression softened. "Come here." He pulled Adrian up into his arms, holding him close, and they stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together, hearts pounding in sync. "I love you," Dante whispered against Adrian's hair. "I've loved you for so long." "I love you too," Adrian replied, the words easier now. "I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you. We're telling each other now." Dante pulled back to look at his face. "That's what matters." Adrian kissed him, slower this time, savoring it. Dante responded in kind, his hands gentle as they cradled Adrian's face. They spent hours learning each other, taking their time despite the urgency humming beneath their skin. Dante was patient and thorough, making sure Adrian was comfortable, checking in constantly, praising every response. And when they finally came together completely, when Dante pressed into him with aching slowness and care, Adrian understood what it meant to feel whole. Like a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing had finally clicked into place. The sensation was overwhelming, walking that edge between too much and not enough. But Dante held him through it, whispering reassurances, pressing kisses to his face and throat, moving with careful control until Adrian's body accepted him fully. "Okay?" Dante's voice was strained, his control clearly tested. "Tell me you're okay." "I'm perfect," Adrian gasped. "You're perfect. Don't stop." Dante began to move, setting a rhythm that was both tender and demanding. Every thrust sent sparks of sensation through Adrian's body, building higher and higher until he thought he might shatter from the intensity. Dante's hands slipped between their bodies, and the dual sensation pushed Adrian over the edge. He came apart with Dante's name on his lips, pleasure crashing through him in waves that left him trembling. Dante followed moments later, Adrian's name a prayer against his throat. They collapsed together, breathing hard, sweat cooling on overheated skin. Dante rolled them to the side, keeping Adrian close, his arms wrapped tight around him. "Adrian," he murmured. "God, Adrian." Adrian couldn't form words yet, could only press closer, burying his face in Dante's neck. His body felt used in the best way, satisfied and sore and utterly content. They lay tangled together as their breathing gradually slowed. Dante's fingers traced idle patterns on Adrian's back, gentle and soothing. "You okay?" Dante asked softly. "That wasn't too much?" Adrian lifted his head to look at him. "That was everything." Dante's smile was soft and full of wonder. "Yeah, it really was." Adrian settled back against his chest, listening to Dante's heartbeat steady beneath his ear. 8 years they'd lost to fear and assumption, but they had now. They had this moment and all the moments to come. "Stay," Dante said, his arms tightening. "Don't go back to your parents' house tonight. Stay here with me." Adrian had planned to go home, to sleep in his childhood bed, to maintain appearances. But the thought of leaving Dante now, of spending even one night apart after finally having this, was unbearable. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll stay." They pulled the covers up and arranged themselves under the blankets. Dante kept Adrian close, one arm around his waist, their legs tangled together. "I meant what I said earlier," Dante murmured into the darkness. "I'm done pretending. I want this, want you, want everyone to know." Adrian's heart squeezed. "What about your parents, your job, our friends?" We'll figure it out. Dante pressed a kiss to his shoulder. Together. But I'm not hiding this. I've hidden how I feel for 8 years. I'm not doing it anymore. The conviction in his voice made Adrian feel brave. Okay, no more hiding. They drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other, years of longing finally satisfied. But just before Adrian slipped under, Dante spoke again. Adrian? Yeah? In the morning we're going to talk about logistics, about how we make this work when you live 2 states away. Because I just got you back, and I'm not losing you again. Adrian smiled against Dante's chest. We'll figure it out. Promise? Promise. Sleep claimed them both, peaceful and deep. And when morning came, when Adrian woke to Dante's arms still around him and golden sunlight streaming through the windows, he felt something settle in his chest that had been restless his entire adult life. This was home. Not the house, not the town, but this. Dante's arms, Dante's smile, Dante's love freely given after years of both of them holding back. They had a lot to figure out. Logistics, families, jobs, the reality of building a life together. But as Dante woke and pulled him closer, kissing him with morning's slow sweetness, Adrian knew they'd find a way. 8 years they'd waited. But some things were worth the wait. And this beautiful, complicated, wonderful thing they'd finally found was worth everything. Morning light filtered through Dante's bedroom curtains, painting everything in soft gold. Adrian stirred slowly, his body pleasantly sore in ways that made his face heat even half asleep. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then Dante's arm tightened around his waist, and everything came rushing back. Last night, the confession, the kiss, everything after. Adrian's eyes flew open to find Dante already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching him with an expression so tender it made Adrian's chest ache. Morning, Dante said softly, his free hand coming up to brush hair from Adrian's forehead. Been awake long? A while. Dante's thumb traced Adrian's cheekbone. I was watching you sleep. Wanted to make sure this was real. Adrian turned into the touch, pressing a kiss to Dante's palm. It's real. Good. Dante leaned down to kiss him properly, slow and sweet and perfect. Then his stomach growled loudly, breaking the moment. They both laughed. Guess we should probably eat something, Dante said, his smile sheepish. I can make breakfast. They got up, and Adrian borrowed a pair of Dante's sweatpants and a t-shirt that hung loose on his smaller frame. Dante's eyes darkened when he saw Adrian in his clothes, and Adrian felt heat pool low in his belly at that possessive look. You're wearing my clothes, Dante said, his voice rough. Is that okay? More than okay. Dante crossed to him, backing Adrian against the dresser, hands settling on his hips. You look good in them. Look like you're mine. I am yours, Adrian said, the words coming easier now. Have been for 8 years, apparently. Dante kissed him again, deeper this time, and it was several minutes before they made it downstairs to the kitchen. Dante cooked while Adrian sat at the counter, watching him move around the familiar space. They talked about small things, easy things, but Adrian could feel the weight of larger conversations waiting. Finally, over pancakes and coffee, Dante broached the subject they'd been avoiding. So, he said, his fingers finding Adrian's across the table. We need to talk about the logistics. Adrian's stomach clenched despite the warmth in Dante's eyes. I know. You live 2 states away. I'm here for now, but my contract with the college team is only for another year. Dante's thumb traced patterns on Adrian's hand. I meant what I said last night. I'm not losing you again. So we need to figure out how to make this work. What are you thinking? Dante took a breath. I'm thinking one of us needs to move. Eventually. Not right away, but soon. And I'm thinking we need to be honest with our families. With everyone. Adrian's heart raced. That's a lot to ask. I know. Dante squeezed his hand. But I've spent 8 years hiding how I feel. I'm done with that. And I need to know if you're willing to do this for real. Not just this weekend, but actually build a life together. The vulnerability in Dante's voice made Adrian's chest tight. I want that. I do. But I'm scared. Of what? Everything. Adrian's voice dropped to barely a whisper. What if our families don't accept it? What if it changes everything between them? Our moms have been best friends for 20 years. Then we deal with it together. Dante's conviction was absolute. Adrian, I love you. I'm in love with you. And I'm not hiding that anymore, no matter what anyone else thinks. The certainty in his voice made Adrian feel brave. Okay, we tell them. But maybe not today? Dante smiled. Not today. Today, we just be together. But soon. They spent the morning wrapped in each other, talking about possibilities. Dante's contract ended next summer. Adrian's job in the city was good, but not irreplaceable. They could make it work if they both compromised. Your parents are going to freak out, Adrian said as they lay tangled on the couch later. My dad's going to have a heart attack. Maybe. Dante's fingers traced lazy patterns on Adrian's arm. Or maybe they already suspect. Your mom made that comment yesterday about me having a soft spot for you. Adrian snorted. She says stuff like that about everyone. She's been trying to set me up with her book club friend's daughter for months. Have you told them you're gay? The question made Adrian freeze. No. I mean, I never explicitly said I was straight, but I never corrected their assumptions either. Then we tell them together. Dante pressed a kiss to his temple. I'll be right there with you. Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from his mother, asking if he was coming home for lunch. Reality intruded on their bubble, reminding them that the world existed beyond Dante's couch. I should probably go back, Adrian said reluctantly, before they send a search party. Dante groaned but didn't argue. Come back tonight? Adrian kissed him. Try and stop me. Walking back to his parents' house felt surreal. Everything looked the same, but Adrian felt fundamentally changed, like he'd left as one person and was returning as someone completely different. His mother took one look at him and smiled that knowing smile again. Had a good time with Dante? Adrian felt his face flame. Yeah, it was good to catch up. His father looked up from his newspaper. That boy always was a good influence on you, kept you out of trouble. If only they knew. Adrian excused himself to his room, needing space to process everything. His phone buzzed with a text from Dante. Missing you already? Adrian smiled, typing back. Same. Tonight? Definitely. And Adrian? I love you. The words still sent his heart racing. I love you too. The afternoon passed in a blur of family time and anxious anticipation. Adrian's parents wanted to hear about his job, his apartment, his life in the city. He answered their questions while his mind was 3 houses down, with Dante. Finally, evening came, and Adrian made an excuse about meeting Dante again. His mother's knowing smile had evolved into something that looked almost like approval. You two have always been close, she said. I'm glad you're reconnecting. Adrian's guilt intensified. They needed to have the conversation soon, before he went crazy keeping this secret. Dante answered the door in jeans and a soft gray sweater that made his eyes look like molten gold. He pulled Adrian inside and kissed him before the door was even fully closed. Missed you, Dante murmured against his mouth. It's been 6 hours. 6 hours too long. They made dinner together, moving around Dante's kitchen with surprising ease. Dante told stories about his work, the athletes he treated, the politics of college sports. Adrian talked about his latest design project, a brand identity for a startup that couldn't decide what they wanted. It felt domestic and perfect and terrifying in how much Adrian wanted this to be his everyday reality. After dinner, they settled on the couch, and Dante pulled Adrian against his chest, arms wrapped around him. "I've been thinking," Dante said quietly, "about the logistics." Adrian's stomach clenched. "Yeah? My contract ends in June. That's 8 months away. What if I don't renew it? What if I look for a job in your city instead?" Adrian twisted to look at him. "You'd do that? Leave here? For you?" Dante's eyes were serious. "In a heartbeat. This town doesn't mean anything to me without you in it. And I can find sports medicine work anywhere. But your family is here. Your life. My life is wherever you are." Dante cupped Adrian's face. "I'm serious about this, Adrian. About us. I want to wake up next to you every morning. Want to come home to you every night. Want to build something real with you." Tears pricked Adrian's eyes. "I want that too, so much." "Then let's do it." Dante's thumb wiped away a tear that had escaped. "We tell our families this weekend. We figure out the distance thing for the next 8 months. And then I move to the city and we start our life together properly." The certainty in his voice made it sound simple, made it sound possible. "Okay," Adrian whispered. "Let's do it." They sealed the decision with a kiss that quickly turned heated. Dante's hands slid under Adrian's shirt, and Adrian arched into the touch, already addicted to the feeling of Dante's hands on his skin. "Bedroom," Dante said against his mouth. "Yes." The second time was different than the first. Less tentative, more confident. They knew each other better now, knew what touches made the other gasp, what words drew out the sweetest sounds. Dante worshipped Adrian's body with hands and mouth, taking his time, making Adrian beg before finally giving him what he needed. And when they came together, it felt even more right than the first time, like pieces of a puzzle locking into place. After, wrapped in Dante's arms, Adrian felt a peace he'd never known. This was home. This was right. Everything else they'd figure out. "Tell me about your apartment," Dante said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on Adrian's back. "It's small. 1 bedroom. Good light for design work." Adrian smiled. "You'll hate the kitchen. It's tiny." "Don't care about the kitchen. Just care that you're there. We could look for a bigger place together. When you move." Dante's arms tightened. "Yeah, we could." They talked late into the night, planning a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. Where they'd live, how they'd combine their lives, what it would be like to finally stop hiding. Sunday morning came too soon. Adrian woke in Dante's bed, sunlight streaming through the windows, and reality crashed back in. Tomorrow he had to drive back to the city, back to his life 2 states away, back to being without Dante. "Hey," Dante said, sensing his mood. "None of that. We're going to make this work. 8 months is a long time. We've waited 8 years. We can handle 8 months." Dante kissed him softly. "Besides, there's weekends, video calls. We'll visit each other." Adrian nodded, trying to convince himself it would be enough. They had breakfast with Adrian's parents, and the older couple beamed at having both boys at their table like old times. Adrian caught his mother watching them with that knowing look, and his guilt intensified. After breakfast, Dante walked Adrian back to his parents' house. They stopped on the sidewalk between the 2 homes, neither wanting to let go. "We should tell them today," Dante said quietly. "Before you leave. Rip the Band-Aid off." Adrian's stomach dropped. "Today?" "We said soon. And I think your mom already suspects something. Adrian looked at the two houses, symbols of the life they'd known, the friendship their families had built. What if this ruins everything? Then we'll deal with it. Together. Dante took his hand, right there on the street where anyone could see. I'm not ashamed of loving you, Adrian. And I don't want you to be either. The conviction in his voice made Adrian brave. Okay, let's do it. They started with the Crawfords. Dante's parents had returned from Colorado that morning, and they greeted Adrian with warm hugs, exclaiming how good it was to see him. Can we talk to you both? Dante asked, his hand finding Adrian's. His parents noticed the gesture, their eyes widening slightly. They sat in the Crawford living room, Dante and Adrian on one couch, his parents on the other. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation. Dante took a breath. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something. Adrian and I, we're together, like together. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. His father's expression was unreadable. We've been in love with each other since high school, Dante continued, his grip on Adrian's hand tight. We just finally admitted it to each other this weekend, and I'm not going to hide it anymore. The silence was deafening. Adrian's heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Finally, Mrs. Crawford spoke. How long have you known? About my feelings? Dante's voice was steady. Since I was 17. About Adrian feeling the same? Since Friday night. His mother looked at Adrian, her eyes soft. And you, sweetheart? This is what you want? Adrian found his voice. Yes, ma'am. I've wanted this for 8 years. Wanted him. Mrs. Crawford stood, and Adrian braced himself for rejection. Instead, she crossed to them and pulled them both into a fierce hug. Oh, my boys, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I've been wondering when you'd finally figure it out. Adrian's head spun. You knew? Mothers always know. She pulled back, her hands on both their faces. I've watched you two orbit each other for years. The way you looked at each other when you thought no one was watching. I hoped, but I didn't want to push. Mr. Crawford stood, his expression still serious. And you're sure about this, both of you? More sure than I've ever been about anything, Dante said. His father studied them for a long moment, then nodded. Then you have my blessing. Both of you. The relief was overwhelming. Adrian felt tears slip down his cheeks as Mrs. Crawford hugged them again. Your parents next? She asked gently. Adrian's stomach clenched. Yeah, if they react badly, They won't, Mrs. Crawford said firmly. Trust me. I know your mother. This won't be the shock you think it is. They walked the 3 houses down to the Bennett home together, the Crawfords flanking them like an army. Adrian's hand was sweating in Dante's, but Dante didn't let go. Adrian's mother opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw the group. Oh, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in. They gathered in the living room, and Adrian's mother immediately sensed something was wrong. What's happened? Nothing's wrong, Dante said, his voice steady. But Adrian and I have something to tell you. Adrian's father looked up from his newspaper, his expression alert. Dante squeezed Adrian's hand, giving him strength. You tell them. Adrian took a shaky breath. Mom, Dad, Dante and I are together. We're in a relationship. And before you ask, yes, I'm gay. I have been my whole life. I just never told you. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Adrian's heart sank until she spoke. Oh, honey, my sweet boy. She crossed to him, pulling him into her arms. Thank you for trusting us with this. You're not upset? Adrian's voice was muffled against her shoulder. Upset? She pulled back, cupping his face. I'm thrilled. I've watched you pine for this boy since you were teenagers. I was starting to think you'd never tell him. Adrian's head spun. Everyone knew but us? His father stood, moving to shake Dante's hand. You treat my son right. With my life, sir, Dante promised. Then welcome to the family. Officially. The relief was so intense Adrian's knees nearly buckled. Dante's arm came around his waist, holding him steady. So when's the wedding? Adrian's mother asked, only half joking. Mom, what? I've been waiting for this for years. I'm allowed to be excited. The families spent the next hour talking, asking questions, sharing observations about how obvious Adrian and Dante's feelings had apparently been to everyone but each other. The love and acceptance in the room made Adrian's chest feel too full. As the evening wore on, reality settled in. Tomorrow, Adrian had to leave. 8 months stretched ahead of them, filled with distance and longing. That night, their last together for weeks, Dante held Adrian close. We're going to make this work, Dante whispered into the darkness. I promise you. I know, Adrian pressed closer. Doesn't make leaving easier. Then don't think about leaving. Think about June. Think about the apartment we'll find together. The life we're going to build. Adrian smiled against Dante's chest. Tell me about it. And Dante did. He painted pictures with words of lazy Sunday mornings and shared dinners, of coming home to each other, of building something permanent and real. He talked until Adrian's breathing evened out, until sleep claimed them both. Monday morning came with brutal finality. Adrian packed his bag while Dante watched from the doorway, his expression tight. 8 months, Dante said. 8 months, Adrian echoed. Then you're mine forever. I'm already yours forever. This just makes it official. They kissed goodbye in Adrian's parents' driveway, not caring who saw. When Adrian finally got in his car, Dante leaned through the window. Call me when you get home. And Adrian, I love you. I love you too. The drive back to the city was the longest of Adrian's life, but when he finally walked into his apartment, his phone was already ringing with a video call from Dante. Hey, Dante's smile filled the screen. Miss me yet? Adrian laughed, feeling some of the ache in his chest ease. So much. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. They talked every day, sometimes for hours. Video calls became their lifeline. Dante would prop his phone up while he cooked dinner, and Adrian would work on designs while they talked. The distance was hard, but they made it work. Adrian flew back for Thanksgiving, and Dante met him at the airport with a kiss that made nearby travelers smile. They spent the holiday with both families, officially introduced as a couple now, and the easy acceptance made Adrian's heart full. Christmas brought Dante to the city. He spent a week in Adrian's tiny apartment, and they christened every surface thoroughly. When he had to leave, Adrian cried into his pillow for an hour. But January brought a turning point. Dante called one evening, his voice excited. I applied for a position at a sports medicine clinic in your city. Adrian's heart stopped. What? I didn't want to say anything until I knew it was real. But I had an interview today, over video call, and they want me to come in person next week for a second interview. The hope blooming in Adrian's chest was almost painful. Do you think you'll get it? I think I have a really good shot. And Adrian, even if I don't get this one, I'm not giving up. I'm moving to the city in June no matter what. This would just make it happen sooner. Dante flew in for the interview the following week. Adrian took the day off work to be there when he got back, pacing his apartment anxiously. When Dante walked in, his grin told Adrian everything he needed to know. They offered me the position, on the spot. Adrian flew into his arms. When do you start? March 1st. Dante held him tight. I can be here permanently in 6 weeks. 6 weeks later, Adrian helped Dante move into his apartment. They decided to keep Adrian's lease until they found a bigger place together, but Dante's stuff filled the small space, making it feel like home in a way it never had before. That first night, with Dante's belongings surrounding them and the certainty that this was permanent, they made love with a desperate intensity born of finally having what they'd wanted for so long. The months that followed were better than Adrian's wildest dreams. They fell into domestic routines, learning each other's quirks and habits. Dante left his socks everywhere. Adrian couldn't function before his first coffee. They argued about the thermostat and whose turn it was to do dishes. It was perfect. By summer, they'd found a bigger apartment with room for both of them. On moving day, their families came to help. The sight of their mothers working together to organize the kitchen while their fathers assembled furniture made Adrian's eyes burn with happy tears. "This is really happening," he said to Dante that night, looking around their new home. Dante pulled him close. "This is really happening. You and me, building a life together." 1 year after their weekend reunion, they hosted both families for dinner in their apartment. Adrian cooked while Dante set the table, and when everyone was gathered, Dante stood and cleared his throat. "We have an announcement," he said, his hand finding Adrian's. Adrian's mother gasped. "Are you engaged?" "Not yet," Dante laughed, "but we did buy a house." The room erupted in congratulations. They'd found a small craftsman in a neighborhood they loved, and the closing was scheduled for next month. "It's not far from here," Adrian added. "You can visit whenever you want." "As if we needed an invitation," his mother said, already planning decorating schemes. Later that night, after everyone had left, Adrian and Dante stood on their balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Do you ever think about that weekend?" Adrian asked. "How different everything would be if you hadn't texted me." "All the time." Dante's arms came around him from behind. "But I like to think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Some things are just meant to be." Adrian turned in his arms. "I love you. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me." Dante kissed him softly. "Thank you for loving me back." They stood there as the city hummed around them, two people who'd spent 8 years hiding from each other, finally building the life they'd both secretly dreamed of. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in their new house, Adrian woke to find Dante missing from bed. He followed the smell of coffee downstairs and found Dante in the kitchen, nervous energy radiating from every line of his body. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked. "Nothing's wrong." Dante set down his coffee cup. I've been thinking." "About?" Dante crossed to him, taking both his hands. "About how we've been together for a year and a half now. About how I've loved you for nearly a decade. About how I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Adrian's heart began to race. Dante dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Adrian Bennett, you've been my best friend since we were kids. You've been the love of my life since I was 17. And you've been my partner, my home, my everything since that weekend we finally stopped hiding from each other. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Adrian's face as he nodded frantically. "Yes. God, yes!" Dante slid the ring onto his finger and stood, pulling Adrian into a kiss that tasted like coffee and promises and forever. They were married the following spring in their backyard, surrounded by family and friends. Both mothers cried through the entire ceremony. Both fathers gave speeches about always knowing their boys would end up together. As they danced their first dance as husbands, Adrian thought about 17-year-old him, lying in his bed and dreaming about impossible things. Thought about all the years he'd spent running from his feelings, convinced they were one-sided. "What are you thinking about?" Dante murmured. "How glad I am that you texted me that day. How grateful I am that you were brave enough to tell me the truth." Dante pulled him closer. "Best decision I ever made." Years later, when people asked how they got together, Adrian would tell them about the 8 years of longing, the weekend that changed everything, the leap of faith they'd both finally taken. But mostly, he'd tell them about love, about how sometimes the person you're looking for has been right in front of you all along, about how courage can look like a simple confession, or a promise to stop hiding. About how sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for, even when the wait feels impossible. And about how coming home isn't always about a place. Sometimes it's about a person. A person whose hand fits perfectly in yours, whose smile makes your heart race even after years together, whose love transforms everything. Dante Crawford had been Adrian's best friend, his first love, and his greatest fear all at once. And now, he was Adrian's husband, his partner, his home. And that, Adrian thought as Dante spun him across their backyard dance floor while their families cheered and their future stretched bright and endless before them, was worth every second of the 8-year wait. Because some love stories start with a dramatic confession, some start with a kiss, some start with a single moment that changes everything. But theirs started with two scared 17-year-olds who didn't know how to name what they felt. It survived years of distance and denial. It waited patiently through fear and assumption. And when it finally bloomed, when they finally let themselves have what they'd always wanted, it transformed into something more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. As the sun set over their wedding reception, as their mothers danced together and their fathers shared a drink, as friends and family celebrated the love that everyone but Adrian and Dante had apparently seen from the beginning, Adrian pulled his husband close. "I love you," he whispered. "Thank you for waiting for me. For us." Dante's answer was a kiss that promised forever, and Adrian believed it. Because they'd already proven that their love could survive anything, even themselves. The music played on, the celebration continued, and two best friends who'd become lovers, who'd become husbands, danced under the stars, finally home in each other's arms. And they lived, as all the best love stories promise, happily ever after.